What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be making a little bit more progress on the Predator cosplay, and I'm going to be doing the abdominal muscles here, which do wrap around into the back as well and fit underneath the chest armor that I did in the previous parts of this series. So, before I go any further, let's just go ahead and jump right into the build video. Okay, so many pieces for the Predator abdominal build. Now, before I get into exactly all of this, I want to give you a quick explanation of how I made this stuff. That way, if you choose not to purchase patterns off Etsy, or you want something with a more custom fit to you, what I did was I wrapped my entire abdominal area front and back from my belt line up to my chest with saran wrap. And then I cut that off and drew out all of my various pattern pieces. From there, I enlarged them slightly, about a tenth of an inch all the way around, because the foam I'm using is 1/2 inch thick foam, and I want this to add a little bit of bulk to me whenever I wear it, so I look bigger and beefier and stronger. I've been on a diet to lose a bunch of weight, so part of that reason, aside from my health got really bad, was so that I could fit inside certain cosplays a little better. I don't have to hide my gut, in other words. It's easier to keep a correct posture and build myself up to look beefy with a monster costume like the Predator, if I'm not fat, essentially. So that's why I lost all the weight. And as far as the patterns go, if you decide to get the ones off Etsy, you're going to need one center strip only. But every other piece you're going to need duplicates. And to give you a quick description of what I mean is, you're going to need a one, and you're going to flip this over and do another one, because these are going to glue on either side of this centerpiece here. Okay? So, duplicates of each, trace the pattern, flip it over. You can put one left, one right, or one L, one R, or one A, one B. I just did one A, one B. I know all the A patterns are going on this side, and all the B patterns are going to go on this side of the center strip. I'm going to start from the center strip and build outwards. But first, I'm going to need to cut all these myriad of pattern pieces out. Like I said, this is 1/2 inch thick EVA foam mat. This took not quite 1.5 pieces to get all the patterns laid out. Number 1 through 21? Yeah, 21. So that's about your general cost of materials for foam right there, is 2 sheets. And I picked these up from Harbor Freight for about, I want to say, I think it was $10 for 4 of them. So that's about $3-4 bucks in foam for starting cost for that. Okay, so I have all the pieces laid out. Okay. Centerpiece, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and the same over here. Now the first thing you may notice is this is longer. This is supposed to line up. Why doesn't this line up? Well, there's a reason why it doesn't line up. And the reason why this is not meant to be glued together flat. Okay? And every single one of these pieces is going to have to be heated and formed, with the exception of the centerpiece will remain flat. If anything, I may curve it inwards, but I doubt it. That's going to remain flat. And then on the 7 piece is going to be curved. This part's going to be flat, and on 21 it will be curved outwards just like everything else, but basically from this point up into here will remain flat, with this part being curved. And how I'm going to curve all this is by heating it with a heat gun. Okay? To give you a quick example here, I'm going to take my piece, throw it down. Okay, so this is thicker foam, so I did get it pretty hot here. And heating it is going to do 2 things. One, it's going to make it pliable enough that you can work it with your fingers and get a shape into it. The other thing it does is it causes the foam to shrink up. That is part of the reason why the pattern pieces have been enlarged. This is pretty crucial. If you don't heat this properly, and shrink these down. Well, not so much shrink them, but curve them appropriately, they're not going to glue into the piece or fit properly. Okay? See, it doesn't fit too big, heated and shaped just a little bit, and it's already looking like it's going to fit almost perfectly. Now, you'll notice how this has a rounded shape, and this is flat and lifeless. If you try to glue this together without heating and shaping all these properly, then you're going to have problems. And you should always be careful when using a heat gun, because a heat gun can melt things. It can catch things on fire. If you're a child, always get a parent's permission before using one or purchasing one. Okay, now here you can see what I was talking about. Now that they have all been heated and curved, they're lining up pretty good with this center piece. And you'll notice I haven't heated and curved these other ones yet. That's mostly just so I can save time and maximize the efficiency of what I'm doing, because what I'm going to start doing now is I'm going to use contact cement. This is a rather beat up container of contact cement, but DAP Weldwood contact cement. You can use whatever brand you want. That's just inexpensive and I have a ton of it. Barge honestly works best, and I usually have to put on almost twice as much of this, but it's about a quarter of the cost where I live and where I can access it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run contact cement along both edges, here and here, all the way from the bottom to the top. Then I'm going to apply it to these pieces. For example, on number 1 will be on the sides and the bottom. Number 2 will be all around to here. You don't need to put it on the back side yet. Same with 3, same with 4, just where it's going to contact. And then 5 as well through here. The rest of the edges you don't need to worry about until you start gluing on the other pieces. But I'm going to go ahead and apply contact cement to these, wait 15 minutes. While I'm waiting the 15 minutes, I'll start heating and forming the next section on both sides that I need to glue together. Alright, here you can see I have contact cemented together parts 1 through 5 onto each side of the centerpiece. And it was a little tricky, but I started with 1, working from the top down through the corner. Did 1 on each side, and then went and did 2, and then 2. And then 3, and then 3, and then down to 4 and 5 in that order. And next, the pieces that I'm going to attach to it are going to be 6, 7, 8, and 9. And if you'll remember, I said 7 from about here was going to be flat. I did not heat this area at all, and it is pretty important that you don't really heat this area. Just leave it flat and even like that for now. Same thing over here on the other side, flat on the end, rounded everywhere else. Of course, 6, 8, and 9 are just curved like usual. Okay, so now on both sides I have attached the 6, 7, 8, and 9 pieces, and you can see it's already starting to take some curve and shape. And next, what I'm going to add on is I'm going to heat and curve 10, and I'm going to curve and squeeze in 11, and over in here will be 12. Okay, so I now have 10, 11, and 12 glued in, and now that that's pretty filled in, not quite straight, but pretty straight up the side here, you'll notice it's holding its round shape a lot better than what it was previously, where there was kind of gaps in between. This is more straight, and it's starting to line up pretty nicely. Now the way I put these pieces in, I put in 10 first, and you'll notice here on your 7 piece, the area that you left flat matches up nice with 12. That's a good way to judge where to put it. However, I did put in 11 first, and 11 was a little tricky. I kind of spread it open, started with the bottom corner and worked up here, and then put in 12 last. And like I say, matched this up and ran this up to here. And you can see over here on this side as well, they are all in. So you may have noticed that there are these gaps here. That is intentional, and we are going to go through later and fill those, along with all the seams with silicone. So don't worry about it for now. We're going to sand this out. I'm going to plug the back side of it, and then we're going to use silicone to help fill it in and smooth it out. Now, I do want these divots here, because once the back here is filled in, it's going to give it a nice impression and nice definition on any of the spots where those are. That's going to be deeper than the lines here, if that makes sense, which should make it hopefully look more realistic. Okay, and next I'm going to start working on the side pieces. The next thing I'm heating and forming is pieces 13, 14, 15, and 16, and this is basically going to form the ribs. I'm going to heat both of these separately just like this, and I'm not going to glue them to this one at a time. I'm going to glue all four together and then attach side A to side A and side B to side B, and just like everything else, I will be using contact cement. Okay, so I have glued together the A and B rib pieces, and I already attached the B here, and it's not quite holding its shape 100% the way I want yet, so bear with that. Once again, as I fill in the bottom and the rest of the pieces, much like with the front here, once you get them all pressed in together, it should line up pretty good with minimal heat forming, I'm hoping, after all this is said and done. But yeah, and I actually glued the pieces together wrong on A and had to tear them apart and re-glue them. So before I glue these on, I want to show you what I did wrong and how to do it right, so everybody knows that. You'll see 13, 14, 15, and 16 here, and you'll notice when you look at the front, all these edges line up straight, and you have this V right here. I actually ended up gluing them wrong and lining up the back edges, which is what you don't do. So yeah, and then once those are glued, you kind of got to force them a little bit, and you need to make sure that all of these are pretty well curved. These rib pieces, this one here, I think I need to do a little more heating and curving on, maybe this one a slight bit too. That way it has a nice tight fit, and I glued it in starting with the corner, attaching the bottom, and then working the side all the way up to the top here. Okay, so I've taken pieces 17, 18, 19, 20 for side A and side B, and I've glued them together, just lining them up at the bottom. And next I'm going to attach them to their corresponding sides over here, along the edge here, and up underneath the abs using contact cement once again. So I've gone ahead and, just for reference here, glued in the B side so you can see it. I'm going to need to do a little bit of heat forming here on the bottom just to get this curved the way I want it, but otherwise it pulled the rib section around perfectly into place. Now it was a rather tight fit. I started on the bottom here, lined it up, glued it up to here, and kept this and this piece separate during all that. And then I really had to squeeze it in to get it glued and lined up just the way that I needed it here. And I'm going to go ahead and do this on the other side, but first I want to show you the other side for reference. You can see here, this is not curved around. It doesn't look like a rib cage. It looks flat and goofy. But once you force that bottom section into place there, it should, if you do it correctly, it should pull and curve it up around just like this one did. And of course, even with doing all this, it's not going to be perfect, but it'll be a lot easier for me to do a final heat form and heat shape, having curved everything ahead of time first off to give it some nice, you can see the definition whenever I turn to the side of everything, particularly here on the rib cage area down into like the sides, going down towards where your hips would be. It comes out looking pretty good with a lot of depth and definition already, and that's without painting or effects or sealing or siliconing, sanding the seams, all the crazy stuff, texturing that I'm going to do coming up. Now that both sides are on, you can see, okay, this is the back here. Next pieces, of course, this is the B side. I have 21B. Now, I don't know if you remember or not in the beginning, I pointed out, whenever I heated and formed this, I used the Sharpie and pointed out from here to here is going to be flat. From here to the rest, curve it. Same thing on both sides. Flat here, curved here. Okay, that's your final piece of back definition. And once again, whenever I go ahead and glue this on, I'm going to start with the bottom, get it up to the seam here, matched up, and then once again force and work this in so I can get the rest of the shape into it. So now that it's put together, let's take a look at it here from different angles. The side, I got some tape here just to help pull it in place around to the actual back. And when I wear this, because I've already tried it on to see how it fits, it comes out with a slight V, which is pretty much perfect because the rear piece V's up into the armor, so nothing will be exposed there, and that's cool. And yeah, pretty stoked with this so far. I haven't done any final heating yet to smooth it around or form anything out to fit my body the rest of the way, but it's already pretty darn close as is. So yeah, this is definitely looking pretty cool so far. Go ahead and take this off. And that's pretty much it for the initial basic construction. Next, I'm going to go on and start to reinforce the backside here. As you will notice, most of these seams, since I've curved it all, don't line up 100% exact. I'll go through and line that to reinforce it with some super glue. I'll just lay this down flat and run some along here to help reinforce it from the inside. And I'm also going to start cutting out pieces of 2mm foam to put in the back here. Okay, so the next thing I've done is show you the inside here. Taken some scrap 3mm EVA foam, and I just crudely cut up a bunch of squares and triangles randomly, and then pieced them in, or cut them smaller if I needed, or cut a bigger hunk. And that was just to cover all those holes. This piece here, you'll notice, I put in simply just to help hold this curve in place, because when I put it on, it's going to pull tight against it, and it's going to want to pull this flat, which is going to take a lot of the definition out of it. So I put that in place to help hold it there. And what I used was super glue for all this. I did not use contact cement. I didn't want to wait the amount of time it would take for contact cement, and I didn't want to try to contact cement all these tiny pieces. Also, super glue gets pretty stiff whenever it bonds with something. So this really isn't going anywhere. This should hold its shape pretty good. So now that that's done, I'm going to move on to sanding. And the majority of the sanding is going to be a lot of these seams. Like here, there's a bit of a gap. I just want all this stuff to come together as smoothly as possible. To take this down, I'm going to be using a Dremel rotary tool. Here is where I usually set it for sanding. Right between 15 and 20. Sometimes a little closer to one or the other, depending upon exactly what I'm doing. And even that isn't something I can break down so much in description, but instinct and experience. So the more you use it, the more familiar you become with it. But you don't have to. You can always use a sanding block or some sandpaper, and just sand it by hand if you wish, or just skip it and not do it at all. I am gonna sand it because I'm gonna eventually silicone over all these, and I want it to be as smooth and seamless as possible. Okay, so I went through and sanded all this. That last clip that was time-lapse was just a small smidge of what I actually did. I filmed it from multiple angles because I kept not being able to get it myself, the Dremel, the piece, into the light since it's so big versus what I normally do, and I don't really have a lot of space in here. So that clip was the only one that really came out good. But all in all, this took about 45 minutes or so to an hour just because I was being pretty careful. I didn't want to gouge it whilst I was sanding it, especially since if, for example, I get too close to this one here, when I'm sanding this one here, this edge here will cut a little moon, a little half circle right into the other piece that I don't want to sand. So I was being pretty careful about how I went about sanding this with the Dremel because I want to gouge it all up. And next I'm going to go ahead and take some 150 grit sandpaper and just start smoothing out and evening out all the Dremel work. Okay, I got my hand sanding done. There actually wasn't a whole lot of it for me to do, to be quite honest with you. So, yeah, that's pretty much that. Now I'm going to move on to siliconing and sealing up, hiding, and covering these seams. The type of silicone I use is from a company named DAP. It is generally sold at home improvement stores like Lowe's. And the particular type is called Alex Plus. It is an acrylic latex plus silicone. It comes in a tube, and it goes in a caulking gun. I squirt it all out, put it in a container, and just use my hand to apply it and spread it out. But before I start covering the seams themselves, I'm going to take some of this stuff here and get it on my finger and start working it down into this hole, or all these holes actually. I'm not going to fill them completely. I do want to have some depth to it. I want it to go down in, just not all the way to the foam in the back. So I'm going to go ahead and start filling all these holes. I'm probably going to have to lay it down, let gravity do some of the work. But I'm going to fill the holes, and then once I get the holes filled appropriately, I have a separate container with water here. I just dip my finger in the water, and I use my finger to spread and even out the silicone, so it's not a big, ugly, globby mess. Alright, so it's been 24 hours since I did this. I just let it sit overnight. It was taking forever to dry here because it was quite humid. And you may notice that it has shrunk considerably. As I pointed out, this is an acrylic latex with silicone, which means water-based. So as it dries, it shrinks, but that's good because I have a nice curved pit that I can smooth out on the edges to help give it that little extra bit of depth and definition that I wanted in the first place. So, the next thing I'm going to start working on is doing the seams. All of the seams over the whole entire thing, which that's probably going to take forever because there's a lot. I'm really not looking forward to this. Okay, so it has been several days, and I've gone through and siliconed all the seams. Now, I want to point out here that I actually bought the wrong type of silicone. It is the right type. It is an acrylic latex silicone that you can smooth out and even out, but I didn't buy the fast dry. I didn't realize that until I was actually messaging back and forth with the Cosplay Noob about the silicone itself, and I was telling him I think they changed it because it's drawing clear. Like, it has kind of a whitish tint you can see in the thicker area there, but it's quite transparent. It's much more like latex than the fast dry, and I kind of regret not getting the fast dry because I can't stand it. And the other thing is, this is clear, so I can't tell if these seams need a little more or a little less. So what I'm going to have to do to make up for this fact is go and get some Plastidip and Plastidip this whole thing. And once it's all one even color, I can see how well I did or didn't do on the seams. And if I need to apply more, I can apply more and just paint over that. So it's not really a huge deal. But yeah, I make mistakes just like everybody else, and there's one of them. Although, like I say, I will say one thing about this product. I really like the feel of it. It's much more flexible than the Fast Dry DAP acrylic latex plus silicone, the Alex Plus. It does have a much nicer, smoother feel. I think I'm going to actually have to do less sanding with this stuff. Or maybe not even any if I apply it correctly, but I still like the option to be able to sand. So make sure you buy the DAP brand Fast Dry Alex Plus. I did not realize that, but now I know. Okay, so I have my black Plastidip. Excuse me. And I put up some cardboard to catch some of the overspray from all this whenever I Plastidip it. Now, if you haven't used Plastidip before, you just want to get a nice, thick, wet, even coat. Actually, that's not catching the light really well. Even though I shouldn't start from the center and the front, I'm going to start from the center and the front so you guys can see this on camera. I've been shaking this for about 2 minutes off camera. And you should shake it periodically as you use it as well. And when you use this stuff, you want to get a nice, thick, even, wet coat. Okay, you don't want to get it too thick that it's going to run, but you don't want it too thin that you're not going to have an even layer. If it's too thin, it'll be kind of pockmarked and it'll make a texture. That's fine if you want a texture, but if you want it slick and smooth, then you need to have a nice, thick, wet layer. Okay, and here it is with a nice, thick, full coat of, that is not focusing at all. There you go. Plastidip over the whole entire thing, and if you're not sure about how much to use, feel free to just use some scrap foam and just test it out. Test it out, spray it on it, see, if you tilt it, does it run, is it too much, is it enough, how has it absorbed it, and make sure you're testing it on the same or a similar type of foam to what you are spraying it on as well, because different densities of foam absorb the Plastidip a little bit different. So feel free to test on any scrap pieces you may have to ensure quality with your build. Before I start painting this, I think it is worth noting that, of course, I sprayed the entire outside of it, and I sprayed along this top edge of the Plastidip. I did not spray the actual bottom edge here, though, because I'm going to be gluing a belt, possibly with thigh armor pieces attached to it, and a front and rear leather piece that's going to hang down as well. So I need that bottom edge with no Plastidip so that the adhesive will stick better. And I'm going to start painting this up with some vinyl and fabric Duplicolor. This stuff absorbs into plastics and rubbers and things of the sort pretty well. The color is sand. You don't have to use this. You can just use spray paint or an airbrush. I just happen to like this stuff because of the effect that it usually has with the Plastidip, where it seems like it absorbs into the Plastidip, and it makes the surface feel honestly less rubbery, a little more flat and dry, and I feel easier to paint on. So that's part of the reason why I use this. The other reason is I end up having a dual use for this. I end up using it for plastic, toy pistols, and Nerf blasters, and things like that. Okay, so you're probably noticing that I'm more or less just dusting this, because I do want some of the black from the Plastidip to show through. Hopefully that makes sense. Put it in a little bit more direct light. You can see it's pretty well coated, but not completely. You can still see the Plastidip showing through, especially when you move the camera around, for example, or yourself if you're viewing it in reality. You can see how it kind of changes in the light and has some nice depth and definition. Okay, so in that last time-lapse clip, I was just airbrushing a little bit of green, kind of just in between the muscles themselves. This is just an initial layer, and after this first layer of green, which is looking pretty good, at least I think so. Now, all I used was some Testors Aztec paint, and this is opaque green. And this is pretty common and not very expensive. However, I do thin this out less to the consistency that it comes in, which is like paint and more towards water, very much more towards water. It's not that thin because it would be almost translucent. You can see there is still some opacity to it. But yeah, that's pretty much it for that. And next, I'm going to go ahead and do some brown. Right, and here's how it looks after adding in some brown overspray over basically in all these areas around where I put all the green as well. I'm pretty much just leaving the center more or less still the same base Plastidip and primer color. And now what I'm going to do is start putting some details on it. And generally you ought to have spots and speckles. Kind of run down through the center and don't really appear too much in through here, a little bit at the points where the muscles meet, but get pretty thick and heavy over and on the sides here. And I'm going to start putting those in using the airbrush. Okay, so I've just spent about 2 hours putting dots on this with the airbrush. And I tried filming it, but it's a slow, tedious process. I mean, not that the time-lapse footage is real exciting anyways, but this would be super boring. But to show you what I do here, I still have some paint in this. And what I did was I took some Graytex opaque black and I mixed it 2 parts of the black to 1 part of medium gray Graytex transparent. And I thinned that out with some water and a little bit of Windex get it nice and smooth through the airbrush. And my airbrush is adjustable, so whenever I push down on it, air comes out. And when I start to pull back, more and more and more paint comes back. When you're pushing down with it drawn all the way back, it's spraying full stream, just like that. And I'm not much for airbrush tutorials, really, because I'm definitely not a master at it, but I just take and just start to draw back on it, like that, until I get a little circle, and I'm just kind of doing them random, different shapes. Then I go back through and put little dots in between the bigger dots, and maybe even some bigger dots in between all that. Just like that. Pretty simple. And the airbrush really does most of the work, just because of that fine mist that it gives and the realistic look that it produces. It just kind of does a lot of the work and does it itself. But you can, of course, just paint circles on it by hand or just not even do it at all. It's your project and your choice. Okay, so now I'm done with the basic paint job here. Next thing I'm going to do is start putting on some industrial strength Velcro. This happens to be white, but it doesn't matter what color it is. I happened to come across an entire roll of this. The back at Just Cause Cosplay Supply, she was nice enough to sell it to me at quite an inexpensive price, as we are relocating the store. But anyways, the way I'm going to glue this in, I'm going to use contact cement. This does have adhesive on it, but I usually apply contact cement over it, so it's double. And I'm going to glue this on the inside here, the sticky part facing out like this. But in order to get it to mount nice and flush and even to this, I'm going to take my Dremel and I'm going to sand down all of this texture so that I have a nice, smooth, even surface to glue to. Okay, so I've already gone ahead and glued in the Velcro over here and put some contact cement on the backside and just used a strip of 3mm EVA foam and just kind of trimmed it with the scissors to the shape that I wanted. And next I have the loop side of the Velcro, the soft side, and I used contact cement once again to glue this to a section of 3mm EVA craft foam, cheap, inexpensive stuff that you can usually find anywhere. And I'm going to glue that on with super glue, fuzzy side in like this. Just use a super glue to glue it in. And then after that, I've already got my hot glue gun heating up, because I'm going to seal that off with hot glue just to make sure it doesn't come off. Okay, so I have the Velcro on here, and I am gonna go ahead and try this on, and do definitely need to find some kind of net, some kind of mesh net to put over this to complete this, but I think I'm gonna need to put that on prior to doing the actual belt, which will probably be the next video, which, yeah, was probably gonna be the belt with the loincloth in the front and rear and the armor on the thighs. But yeah, I am pretty happy with how this turned out so far. One thing I am going to do off camera is put two straps coming from here and here that are going to go over my shoulders and Velcro into the back, adjustable. That way it'll act like suspenders and hold this up underneath the actual chest armor. So I guess now all that's left for this video is for me to go ahead and grab the mask and try all this on and see how it looks. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. And if you're interested in patterns, they will be up on Etsy. Now, however, keep in mind, this was made to fit me. And I am a size 32-inch waist. And this was made a little bit bigger, so that it adds a little bit of bulk to me. And one thing I would change, if you were going to turn this into a pattern for a superhero suit or muscle, I would minimize the width of the center strip pattern piece, because Part of the reason it's this wide is based on the anatomy from various photos I could find for reference for the predator species. And that was one of the first things I noted. There's a bit more of a gap right there where all these little speckles are on it. So that's one thing I would probably change, minimize, and do a little bit different. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. And the next one in this series will be the belt and possibly the neck piece in the same video, because I don't think either one's going to take a whole lot of time. I don't know, maybe it will. But we'll see. That's the next thing I'm going to do. I have to have this done by October for convention, so I've got to get working on it as quickly and as fast as possible. But as always, thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate that. It does help out the channel a lot. And as always, good luck with all of your cosplays, and have a great day.